Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was summoned by alternate All Mights. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The scent of machine oil and antiseptic clung to him like a second skin. It was the perfume of the post-war world, a constant, cloying reminder of battles fought and friends nearly lost. Izuku Midoriya sat on the edge of his bed in the UA Heights Alliance dorm, the room a small island of sterile calm in the ocean of his exhaustion. His shoulders ached with a weariness that felt bone-deep, a phantom weight that had little to do with physical exertion and everything to do with the crushing mantle of One for All. His hands, cross-hatched with a tapestry of pale scars, were busy. He meticulously cleaned the articulated joints of his Air Force gloves and the iron soles of his boots. The motions were practiced, automatic. Tune the compression supports. Check the integrity of the impact plating. Polish the scuffs from the metal. It was a grounding ritual, a way to focus his buzzing mind on something tangible, something he could fix with his own two hands. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised shades of orange and purple that were too beautiful for the world he now knew. The war, the first one, he reminded himself with a grim certainty that there would be others, had ripped the vibrant color from their lives, leaving behind a monochrome reality of vigilance and recovery. Every shadow seemed to stretch a little too far, every unexpected noise a potential threat. A low thrum resonated in his core. It was the familiar chorus of the vestiges, the symphony of souls that lived within him. It was usually a comforting presence, a silent counsel offering support. Tonight it felt different. Restless. The second and third users were like coiled springs, their primal battle instincts bleeding into his own consciousness. Nana Shimura's presence was a soft, sorrowful hum, a constant ache of empathy for the broken world outside. It's too quiet, he thought, his eyes scanning the empty corners of his room. The quiet was a luxury they had fought and bled for, but it never felt safe. It felt like the breath a predator takes before it strikes. His danger sense, a persistent, low-level static at the base of his skull, prickled. It had been doing that for weeks, a ghost signal with no discernible source, a byproduct of a world steeped in fear and lingering malice. He set down a polished bracer, the metal cool against the worn wood of his desk. He flexed his fingers, watching the faint green lightning of One for All crackle over his knuckles, more subdued than usual. He was the ninth, the one meant to complete the cycle, to finally end the century-long struggle against All for One. But right now, he didn't feel like a pillar of hope. He felt like a boy holding together a crumbling dam with his bare hands. He closed his eyes, leaning back until his head rested against the All Might poster on his wall, a relic from a simpler, more innocent time. The smiling, indomitable face of his idol felt like a photograph from a history book, a mythic figure from a bygone age of impossible optimism. That's when the thrum changed. It wasn't the sharp, specific jolt of danger sense warning of an imminent attack. This was deeper, more fundamental. The quiet chorus of the vestiges swelled into a deafening orchestra. The energy of One for All, usually a contained star in his chest, began to flare, not with anger or exertion, but with a resonant, harmonic frequency he had never felt before. The air in his room grew thick, heavy, tasting of ozone and something impossibly ancient, like starlight and honey. A light began to bloom, not from an external source, but from him. It was a brilliant, shimmering gold, the exact color of All Might's power in his prime, yet it felt purer, more concentrated. It seeped from his pores, casting long, dancing shadows across his room. The All Might poster behind him was bathed in the glow, the hero's signature smile seeming to gain a new, profound depth. What's happening?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. He tried to stand, but his limbs felt heavy, anchored by this strange, burgeoning power. The vestiges were screaming now, not in pain, but in what felt like awe and recognition. He could feel their distinct presences swirling within the golden tide, Yoichi's surprised curiosity, the second's guarded suspicion, Nana's overwhelming sense of homecoming. Then came the pull. It wasn't violent. It was absolute. A gentle but inexorable force took hold of him, a cosmic tide drawing him out to sea. His hero's instincts, honed by 1,000 battles, screamed at him to resist. "No!" he grunted, slamming his feet to the floor. Black whip! Dark, crackling tendrils of energy erupted from his arms, lashing out to anchor him. They wrapped around his desk, his bed frame, the sturdy metal support beam in the corner of his room. The wood of his desk splintered under the strain, the metal of the bed frame groaning in protest. For a moment he held fast, a dark, defiant knot against the rising golden sun, but it was like trying to anchor himself against the pull of gravity itself. The golden light intensified, and the force pulling him didn't fight his black whip, it simply ignored it. The tendrils dissolved not into nothingness, but back into the light, absorbed as if they were merely a different shade of the same energy. The world around him began to lose its definition. The edges of his desk, the lines of his posters, the very walls of his room smeared into streaks of color, pulled toward the singularity that he had become. He felt his own body deconstructing, not in a painful, atomizing way, but like a complex knot being patiently, carefully undone. It was the most terrifying and strangely peaceful sensation he had ever experienced. His last conscious thought was of his friends, of Uraraka's determined face and Ida's unwavering loyalty. A silent apology formed on his lips. "I'm sorry." Then, the world was gold. The reconstruction was as gentle as the deconstruction. He felt himself being woven back into existence, thread by thread, molecule by molecule. The first thing to return was his hearing. A sound filled his senses, a soft, choral hum like a million distant heartbeats all beating in the same, steady rhythm. The scent of ozone and starlight returned, but it was no longer overwhelming. It was simply the air he now breathed. He opened his eyes. He was standing in a place that defied logic and physics. It wasn't a room, but a space. An endless expanse of soft, golden light, stretching into an infinite, luminous horizon. The floor beneath his feet was like solid gold, yet it yielded slightly with every shift of his weight, as if it were made of condensed light. Floating through the air were countless motes of energy, tiny, shimmering spheres that pulsed with a gentle inner light. As one drifted past, he saw, for a fraction of a second, a flicker of an image within it, a young, blond man with a dazzling smile, standing over a defeated villain. Another mote showed a woman with a floating black ponytail, a kind hand resting on a small boy's head. They were memories. Moments. It is the heart of the legacy. A voice boomed, startling him. The nexus point where all the echoes of our power converge. Welcome, ninth user. Izuku whirled around, his body instantly snapping into a defensive stance, green lightning flaring to life around him. Before him stood a figure that stole the breath from his lungs and made his heart hammer against his ribs. It was All Might. But it wasn't the skeletal, broken All Might he knew, nor was it the muscle-bound hero from the posters. This was something more. He stood at his full, heroic height, his iconic costume pristine, not a single tear or scorch mark on it. The two antennae-like bangs of his hair stood proud and defiant. But it was his face that was different. The lines of age were there, etched around his eyes and mouth, but they were lines of wisdom, not of suffering. His eyes, a brilliant, piercing blue, held no trace of the shadows that haunted the Toshinori Yagi of his world. There was no catastrophic injury, no time limit, no smoldering embers of a dying fire. This was All Might as he should have been, the symbol of peace who had won his final battle and had been allowed to grow old, his power undiminished. He radiated a calm, profound strength that dwarfed even the prime All Might Izuku had seen in videos. "You," Izuku stammered, his defensive stance faltering. "You're All Might." The man's lips curved into a familiar, reassuring smile, though it was softer, more paternal than the bombastic grin of his youth. "I am. Or rather, I am one version of him. You may call me Prime Might. It is an honor to finally meet you, Izuku Midoriya." Izuku's mind was a maelstrom of questions. A version? Nexus? Where am I? How do you know my name? Before he could voice any of them, another figure stepped out from behind Prime Might, and the contrast was so jarring it felt like a physical blow. This man was also Toshinori Yagi, but a version that life had relentlessly, cruelly beaten down. He was as gaunt as the All Might Izuku knew, but the reason felt different. It wasn't from a battle wound. It was the ingrained weariness of a man who had seen the worst of humanity, and had never had the power to stop it. He wore a rumpled tan trench coat over a simple shirt and slacks. His blonde hair was limp and unkempt, and his face was a roadmap of cynicism and exhaustion. The brilliant blue eyes were there, but they were flat, tired, and held the sharp, assessing gaze of a seasoned homicide detective. Izuku's danger sense, which had been humming in this strange place, went utterly silent when focused on him. He was quirkless. Utterly and completely. The quirkless man took a long drag from a cigarette that seemed to appear from nowhere, its cherry a tiny, defiant spark in the golden expanse. He blew a plume of smoke, which dissipated instantly into the luminous air. "So this is the kid," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. It was Yagi's voice, but stripped of all its warmth and bravado. "The ninth pillar. He looks like he just crawled out of a meat grinder. Are you sure he's the one, Prime? He looks like he's about to collapse." "Appearances can be deceiving, Detective," Prime Might said gently. "His spirit is the strongest of us all. Spirit doesn't close case files." The detective grumbled, but he continued to watch Izuku with an unnerving, analytical intensity. Izuku felt a chill. To see the visage of his mentor, so devoid of hope, so steeped in a gritty, weary realism, it was profoundly wrong. Then, a third figure moved. This one had been standing in the periphery, silent and immobile as a statue. He was the same height as Prime Might, with the same heroic build, but his presence was a vortex of grief and grim duty. He wore a modified version of All Might's costume, but it was integrated with heavy, dark gray plating and pulsing blue cybernetics. A network of thick cables snaked over his shoulders and into a large, humming technological pack on his back. His left arm was entirely cybernetic, a marvel of polished chrome and articulated plates. His face was hidden behind a T-shaped blue visor, the same shape as All Might's shadowed eyes, but this one glowed with a cold, electronic light. A low hiss of pneumatics accompanied his every slight movement. He didn't radiate power like Prime Might. He radiated control, suppression, and an unending, solitary vigilance. This All Might, this sentinel, finally spoke. His voice was a digitized, toneless baritone, filtered through a vocoder. The summoning was stable. Vital signs are elevated but within acceptable parameters for a subject undergoing transdimensional displacement. He is ready. Izuku's head swam. 3 All Mights. One who had won completely, one who had never had the chance to fight, and one who had won at a terrible, dehumanizing cost. It was too much. He stumbled back a step, his mind racing, trying to apply his analytical skills to an impossible situation. "Alternate timelines," he breathed, the words of a sci-fi movie falling from his lips. "You're All Might. From different worlds, correct?" Prime Might confirmed, his expression softening with sympathy. "Aptly deduced, young Midoriya. This nexus is a convergence point, a sanctuary that exists outside of time and space, manifested by the collective will of one for all across the multiverse." Izuku pointed a trembling finger at the detective. "A world where you never received one for all." The detective, Yagi, gave a short, bitter laugh. "In my world, Nana Shimura died before she ever met a scrawny, quirkless kid with a stupid sense of justice. I ended up on the police force instead. I chased the monsters. I just can't fight them." Izuku's gaze shifted to the imposing, cybernetic figure. "And you won. Against All for One. But the cost." The sentinel's visor seemed to dim for a second. "Victory is not without sacrifice. I ensured the survival of my world. I am its sole protector. Its sentinel." His voice was devoid of pride, thick only with the weight of his duty. Izuku finally looked back to Prime Might, the anchor in this sea of impossibilities. "And you? Your world?" "I was fortunate," Prime Might said, a flicker of sadness in his eyes, as if acknowledging a survivor's guilt. "I defeated All for One. I captured him. I did so before he could inflict a permanent wound upon me. I remained the symbol of peace, and my successor, a fine young man named Mirio Togata, is now ready to take my place. My world is safe, which is why I am able to serve as the anchor for this Council of Mights." He gestured to the 3 of them. A council of his idol, in all his glorious, tragic, and broken forms. Izuku felt an overwhelming urge to start taking notes, to document everything, but he clenched his fists to stop the impulse. This wasn't a theoretical exercise. The gravity in the air told him that. Why? Izuku finally asked, the most important question of all. Why did you summon me? It was Prime Might who answered, his voice losing its gentle tone and taking on a grave seriousness. Because the multiverse, this great web of realities, is fraying. One for all is more than a quirk, young man. In every reality it exists, it acts as a pillar, a foundational point of hope and order. But many of those pillars are crumbling. Detective Yagi took over, his cynical tone cutting through the cosmic explanation. He means our worlds are going to hell. My world is drowning in crime and corruption that the so-called heroes are either unable or unwilling to stop. People are losing faith. Without a true symbol, society eats itself from the inside out. The Sentinel's digitized voice added, My world knows only peace. A peace I enforce. But it is a brittle, fragile thing. A gilded cage. The human spirit is not meant for cages, and the bars are beginning to crack. My methods have reached their limit. Prime Might brought the point home. We are bound to our timelines, or in my case, to this nexus. We can see the rot, but we cannot act outside our own reality. But you are different. How? Izuku asked, his voice barely a whisper. You are the ninth, Prime Might stated, as if this explained everything. The number of completion. The one who inherited not just the power, but the quirks of all who came before. Black Whip. Float. Smokescreen. Danger Sense. FA Gene. Gearshift. This unique convergence of abilities makes you more versatile, more adaptable than any of us ever were. He took a step closer, his immense presence both comforting and intimidating. But more than that, it is your heart. We have watched you, Izuku Midoriya. We have seen your timeline. We saw you on that rooftop, a quirkless boy, running to save your tormentor because it was the right thing to do. We saw you shatter your bones again and again for others. We saw you carry the weight of the world alone to protect your friends. In every other timeline, one for all was given to someone who was already brave, already strong. But you were given power because you embodied the very soul of heroism long before you had the strength to back it up. That is why you were chosen. Not by us, but by the legacy itself. Izuku felt tears welling in his eyes. To hear this from him, from the ultimate version of his idol, was a validation so profound it almost buckled his knees. All the pain, all the fear, all the sacrifice, it was seen. It was understood. Our worlds need more than a punch, Detective Yagi said, flicking his cigarette butt into the ether, where it vanished. They need their faith restored. They need a symbol. But not a statue, a living, breathing hero who reminds them what the word is supposed to mean. We need you to travel to our worlds, the Sentinel stated, the simple command carrying the weight of a decree. To be the hero we can no longer be. To reignite the flame. The weight of their request settled on him, heavier than the pressure of his own war. They wanted him to be a multiversal repairman for broken realities. He, a teenager who was still struggling to save his own home. I don't know if I can, he admitted, the doubt a cold stone in his gut. The fight in my world, it's not over. My friends, my family, they need me. We are aware, Prime Might said softly. This nexus exists outside the flow of time. For every week you might spend in another reality, mere seconds will pass in your own. You will be returned to the exact moment you left, with all the experience and knowledge you have gained. You will not be abandoning your duty. You will be training for it in the most extreme way imaginable. Izuku looked at the three of them. The ideal. The cynic. The warden. 3 paths his mentor could have walked. 3 broken worlds waiting for a hero. His own exhaustion felt petty in the face of their cosmic despair. His promise to All Might, the one from his world, had been to be the greatest hero. He never specified which world. He straightened his back, the aches and pains of his own reality fading into the background. The hesitation in his heart was replaced by a familiar, burning resolve. The same resolve that made him run toward the sludge villain. The same resolve that made him break his fingers against Todoroki. The same resolve that made him face Shigaraki alone. What's the first mission? He asked, his voice clear and steady. The green lightning of one for all danced over his skin, brighter now, eager. A rare, faint smile touched Detective Yagi's lips. It was a sad, tired thing, but it was a smile nonetheless. He stepped forward. My world, he said. Muzutafu, Japan. But it's not the city you know. It's a darker, meaner place. There's a case. A series of kidnappings targeting people with useless quirks. The police are stumped, and the local heroes are more interested in their approval ratings than in finding missing people in the dead of night. My world doesn't need a flying powerhouse. It needs someone who knows how to save people when no one is watching. Prime might place the colossal, gentle hand on Izuku's shoulder. The warmth and power that flowed from the touch was staggering. Go, young Midoriya. Show him what a hero without a quirk can inspire, and show that world what a true hero can do. The golden light of the Nexus swirled around him once more, but this time, it was different. It felt like a gateway. Detective Yagi gave him a final, sharp nod. Don't get yourself killed, kid. The paperwork is a nightmare. The world dissolved again, not into golden light, but into shadows and neon, the smell of rain-soaked asphalt and decay filling his senses. The choral hum of the Nexus was replaced by the distant, lonely wail of a siren. Izuku Midoriya, the ninth pillar, had arrived. And his work was just beginning. The transition was a violent wrenching of the senses. One moment, Izuku was bathed in the celestial, unconditional gold of the Nexus. The next, he was standing in a filthy alley, the world rendered in shades of gray and dripping neon. A cold, persistent rain fell from a sky the color of a lead plate, plastering his green hair to his forehead. The air was thick with the smell of wet garbage, cheap noodles, and an undercurrent of urban decay that felt physically greasy. A distant siren wailed, a lonely, mournful sound that echoed off the grimy brick walls. He was in Muzutafu, but it was a distorted reflection, a version of his home seen through a cracked and grimy lens. The familiar skyline was there, but the heroic architecture of UA was absent, replaced by monolithic, faceless corporate towers that spewed plumes of chemical-tinged steam into the perpetual twilight. Neon signs in kanji flickered erratically, advertising pachinko parlors and noodle bars with a desperate, garish energy. Before his eyes could fully adjust, a gruff voice cut through the patter of the rain. Close your mouth, kid. You look like a fish. Izuku snapped his jaw shut and turned. Leaning against the alley wall, looking as if he'd grown there like a stubborn weed, was Detective Yagi. He was nursing a steaming paper cup of what smelled like burnt coffee and watching Izuku with those same flat, tired eyes. The golden light of the Nexus was gone, and under the sickly glow of a flickering red sign, Yagi looked even more worn down, a man whittled away by 1,000 disappointments. You'd get used to the smell, Yagi said, taking a sip from his cup. Or you die. Your choice. This is your world? Izuku asked, his voice hushed. He could feel the oppressive weight of the city's despair, a low-frequency hum of misery that made his skin crawl. It's nobody's world, kid. We just rent space in it, Yagi retorted, pushing himself off the wall. Come on. The rain's not going to solve my case for me. He started walking, his trench coat billowing slightly behind him, not with heroic flair, but with the weary motion of a man trudging toward another long night. Izuku hurried to catch up, his hero costume feeling absurdly bright and out of place in this muted world. People on the crowded sidewalk gave him a wide berth, their expressions ranging from disinterest to open suspicion. A few muttered under their breath words like cape and show off. He saw a hero, a man in a gaudy silver costume with a ludicrously large helmet, posing for a selfie with a tourist while, not 20 feet away, a purse snatching took place. The hero didn't even flinch. Don't bother, Yagi said without looking at him, correctly interpreting Izuku's aborted move to intervene. The cops'll get the thief. Crush your head over there is only contracted for brand protection and public morale. Robberies are outside his jurisdiction. And his pay grade. The cynicism was so thick in his voice it was practically a physical force. They arrived at a grim, concrete building that housed the Muzutafu Central Police Department. The inside was a chaotic hive of activity. Officers shouted into phones, witnesses gave tearful statements, and the air was dense with the smell of stale coffee, wet wool, and desperation. Yagi led him through the bullpen to a cramped corner that served as his office. It was a disaster zone. Piles of manila folders threatened to avalanche onto the floor. The desk was barely visible beneath stacks of reports and half-empty mugs, and a large corkboard was a chaotic spiderweb of photos, maps, and scribbled notes connected by colored yarn. Home sweet home, Yagi grunted, clearing a stack of files off a rickety chair. Sit. Don't touch anything. Izuku sat, his eyes immediately drawn to the corkboard. It was a map of the city, dotted with pushpins. The photos were of the victims. A young woman who could change the color of her fingernails. An old man whose quirk let him perfectly peel an apple in one continuous strip. A teenager who could make his shoelaces tie themselves. The vanishings, Izuku said, recognizing the pattern. You said they have minor quirks, useless quirks, our perp seems to think. Yagi corrected, lighting another cigarette. He pointed a nicotine-stained finger at the board. 7 victims in 3 weeks. No ransom notes, no bodies, no witnesses. They're just gone. Plucked right out of their lives. The one thing they all have in common is that their quirks are non-combative, subtle, what the media loves to call novelty acts. Izuku's mind was already whirring, the analytical part of his brain, the part that had filled dozens of notebooks, kicking into high gear. Is there a geographic pattern? A timeline? They're all over the city. No discernible pattern. One was taken from a high-end apartment in the Roppongi district, another from a flophouse down by the docks. Day, night, doesn't matter. The only consistency is the inconsistency. Izuku stood up and approached the board, his eyes tracing the lines of yarn. That's a pattern in itself. He muttered, more to himself than to Yagi. A deliberate attempt to create a lack of pattern. The perpetrator is smart. He's trying to look like a random force of nature, but this is meticulously planned chaos. He pointed to 2 pins that were close together. These 2, they were taken on the same day, but 12 hours apart. One in the morning, one at night. Why? To throw off the time of day profiling. He's thinking like a detective. Yagi stopped with the cigarette halfway to his lips, a flicker of something. Surprise? Interest? In his tired eyes. You're not just a slab of muscle and spandex, are you? I analyze things, Izuku said, a faint blush creeping up his neck. Heroes, quirks, situations. It helps me prepare. Preparation. Yagi scoffed, but there was less bite in it this time. He gestured to a pile of files. Knock yourself out. That's everything we've got. Lab reports, preliminary interviews, financial records. It's a whole lot of nothing. For the next several hours, Izuku was a whirlwind of focused energy. He didn't use one for all. He used his mind. He sat on the floor, surrounded by files, his muttering a low, constant hum in the corner of the office. He cross-referenced timelines, victimologies, and locations with a speed and intensity that made Yagi's head spin. The detective watched him, feigning disinterest, but his gaze lingered. He'd seen a lot of heroes. They came in, made a statement for the cameras, flexed their powers, and left when the trail went cold. They were tools, not partners. This kid was working the case. The entry points, Izuku said suddenly, looking up from a file, his green eyes bright with focus. The reports all say no forced entry. But that's not right. Look. He held up 2 crime scene photos, one of a pristine apartment, the other of a messy bachelor pad. In both scenes, the dust on the windowsill is disturbed. Here and here. A very small area, not enough for a person to climb through, but maybe for something else? A tool? Or a quirk that can create a small entry point? Yagi leaned over, squinting at the photos. He'd looked at them 100 times, but he'd been looking for a busted lock, a broken window. He'd missed the minutiae. Could be, he admitted, his voice grudging. And the substance, Izuku continued, pulling out a lab report. The trace particulates found at 3 of the scenes. The lab identified it as a mix of common industrial solvents and a protein-based polymer, but couldn't get a definitive match. They called it inconclusive. Junk science, Yagi grumbled. The lab's as underfunded as we are. Maybe not, Izuku said, his muttering increasing in tempo. Polymer, protein-based. A quirk that generates a substance, combined with a solvent to dissolve it after use? It could be a way to create a temporary lockpick, or bypass a security system, and then leave no evidence behind. It's brilliant. He's not leaving no trace, he's actively removing the traces. A silence fell over the small office, broken only by the rain outside and the frantic scratching of Izuku's pen as he scribbled in a small notebook he produced from a pouch on his belt. Yagi stared at the kid, at the feverish intelligence in his eyes. For the first time all night, the detective felt a sliver of something he hadn't felt in years: hope. "All right, kid," Yagi said, crushing his cigarette in an overflowing ashtray. "You've got a theory. Let's go see if it holds water. There's one scene that hasn't been fully released back to the family yet: an apartment in the Koto ward. Let's go kick the tires." The apartment was on the 7th floor of a nondescript building. The police tape was still up, a flimsy yellow barrier against a world that had already moved on. As they stepped out of the elevator, a low, persistent buzz started at the base of Izuku's skull. Danger sense. It wasn't a sharp alarm, but a faint, residual thrum. The echo of a threat that had already passed. "Something happened here," he said softly. "That's why we're here, kid. Try to keep up," Yagi said, unlocking the door. Inside, the apartment was eerily tidy. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the coffee table. A book lay open beside it. It was a scene frozen in time, the moment of interruption preserved. Yagi began his methodical sweep of the room, but Izuku stood perfectly still, closing his eyes and concentrating. He let his quirks be his guide. Danger sense gave him a faint map of where the struggle occurred, a brief, panicked moment near the window. He opened his eyes and walked over to it. Just as he predicted, a small section of the windowsill had its thin layer of city grime disturbed. He then activated Black Whip, but not as a weapon. He let a single, hair-thin tendril of black energy emerge from his fingertip, using it as an impossibly sensitive probe. He traced it over the window latch. The metal was unscratched, but the tendril vibrated faintly as it passed over the internal mechanism. "He didn't pick the lock," Izuku breathed. "He phased right through it. The polymer you found, maybe it allows him to temporarily make small objects intangible." He reaches through the frame, unlocks it from the inside, and leaves no marks. "Phasing quirks are rare. And powerful," Yagi noted, making a note in his own small, beat-up notepad. "Doesn't fit the useless quirk profile of the victims. The villain doesn't have a useless quirk. He targets people with them," Izuku clarified. "He must see himself as superior, someone with a useful, powerful quirk, who believes that those without one are lesser. It's a quirk purity ideology." As Yagi processed this, Izuku's danger sense suddenly spiked, not from the past, but from the present. It was a sharp, localized warning. He didn't shout. He didn't make a show of it. He acted. "Detective, move!" he said, his voice sharp but controlled. He lunged forward, grabbing the back of Yagi's trench coat, and yanking him back just as a section of the floorboards by the door gave way with a sickening crack. Yagi stumbled back, his eyes wide as he looked at the hole where he'd been about to step. A fall from the 7th floor. It wouldn't have been a simple broken leg. "A pressure-sensitive trap," Izuku said, his heart pounding. "Set for whoever came back to investigate. He knew you'd be back." Yagi stared at the hole, then back at Izuku. The kid hadn't blasted the trap or made a scene. He'd simply seen the danger and acted, a quiet, efficient act of saving a life. "How did you?" Yagi started. "I have a quirk that lets me sense threats," Izuku explained simply. "It's helpful." "Helpful," Yagi repeated, his voice flat. He looked at Izuku, at the earnest concern in the boy's eyes, and then back at the hole. He ran a hand through his limp hair. "Okay, kid. Okay." They spent another hour at the scene, with Izuku using danger sense to sweep for any other traps. They found 2 more, a microfilament wire across the hallway and a contact poison on a light switch. The perpetrator was not just a kidnapper, he was a meticulous killer, covering his tracks with lethal efficiency. Back in Yagi's car, the city lights smeared past in the rain. The silence was different now. It wasn't tense, it was contemplative. "This guy. Silas, let's call him Silas," Izuku said, looking at his notebook. He's arrogant. He believes his quirk and his intellect make him superior. He kidnaps people with quirks he deems impure or flawed. He sets traps for the police, seeing you as an annoyance he can swat away. He's a narcissist. And narcissists love to build monuments to themselves. What are you getting at? Yagi asked, his eyes on the road. He wouldn't hide his victims in some random warehouse. He'd take them somewhere meaningful to him. A place that reflects his ideology. Was there ever a facility in Muzidafu for quirk correction or something similar? Some old eugenics-style institution? Yagi was silent for a long moment. The rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers filled the car. A long time ago, he said, his voice distant. Before the age of modern heroes. There was a place, the Shirakumo Quirk Advancement Institute. It was a private research facility, supposedly dedicated to helping children maximize their quirk potential. It was shut down decades ago. A scandal. Unethical experiments, psychological abuse. They believed they could prune the quirk factor, eliminate undesirable traits. Where is it? Izuku asked, his voice tight. It's a ruin. In the industrial sector by the old canals. Condemned for 30 years. Yagi's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. No one's been out there in ages. He's there, Izuku said with certainty. It's the perfect place. Isolated. Forgotten. And ideologically it's his cathedral. Yagi didn't respond. He just made a sharp, sudden U-turn, the tires squealing on the wet pavement, and accelerated into the night. The Shirakumo Institute was a skeletal ruin, a monument to forgotten cruelty. It loomed out of the industrial smog, its windows like vacant eyes, its walls streaked with grime and graffiti. A rusted, wrought iron fence surrounded the property, a flimsy deterrent at best. Local heroes won't come out this far, Yagi said, killing the engine. No cameras, no crowds. No paycheck. He pulled a standard-issue pistol from his shoulder holster and checked the magazine. It looked like a child's toy against the backdrop of the decaying building. The plan? We don't go in the front door, Izuku said, his eyes scanning the building's architecture. His own plan was forming, one born not of overwhelming power, but of stealth and precision. He expects a frontal assault. We'll give him the opposite. Yagi nodded, a grim understanding passing between them. This wasn't a job for a symbol of peace. This was a job for a scalpel. Izuku filled his lungs with air, then released a thick, rolling cloud of gray vapor. Smokescreen. The fog enveloped them, clinging to the ground and obscuring them from any potential lookouts. It was a perfect cover. Under the veil of his own creation, they slipped through a break in the fence. There, Izuku whispered, pointing toward the third floor. The window frames are newer than the rest. That's a recent replacement. He's using the upper floors. How do we get up there without making a sound? Yagi asked, his voice a low growl. Izuku just smiled faintly. Float. He gathered Yagi in one arm. The detective was shockingly light, all bone and regret, and activated Nana Shimura's quirk. They rose silently, a ghostly apparition in the mist, ascending toward the third-floor window. As they drew level, Izuku activated his next tool. A thin, controllable tendril of black whip snaked out, not to smash, but to gently probe the window latch. Just as he theorized, it was a modern, complex lock. But it was still a physical mechanism. With intense concentration, he manipulated the tendril, inserting it into the tiny gaps, and carefully, painstakingly, tripped the tumblers inside. With a soft click, the lock slid open. They slipped inside into a long, dark corridor that smelled of dust and chemicals. Izuku's danger sense was a constant, high-pitched thrum, warning him of the man they were hunting. Down the hall, a faint light shone from beneath a heavy steel door. As they crept closer, they could hear a voice, cold and pedantic, drifting from the room. The quirk factor is a gift, but a flawed one. It bestows power without purpose, ability without aesthetic. It creates clutter. Like a beautiful garden overrun with weeds. My work is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of purification. An act of art. Yagi's hand tightened on his pistol. Izuku put a hand on his arm, shaking his head. Not yet. He used Black Whip again, this time to create a tiny, periscopic probe that he slipped under the door. Through the dark energy, he could see the scene inside. The 7 victims were there, conscious, held in transparent containment cells. In the center of the room stood a tall, gaunt man in a pristine lab coat. This was Silas. His quirk was visible. His hands were elongated into strange, semi-translucent tools, one a shimmering scalpel, the other a delicate-looking clamp. He was preparing a terrifying medical device. They were out of time. Izuku looked at Yagi and held up 3 fingers. On 3, they would breach. Yagi nodded. 1. Izuku planted his feet, channeling 1 for all into his legs. 2. Yagi raised his pistol, his aim steady. 3. Izuku didn't smash the door down. That was too loud, too crude. Instead, he wrapped it in a dozen black whip tendrils and, with a single, explosive grunt, ripped the entire door and its frame out of the wall. Tossing it aside, he burst into the room. "It's over, Silas!" The villain whirled around, his face a mask of shocked fury. "A hero? Here? Impossible! You got sloppy!" Yagi snapped, stepping in behind Izuku, his gun trained on the man's chest. "All that talk about perfection, and you missed the dust on the windowsills." For a split second, Silas was frozen, caught between the quirkless detective and the powerhouse hero. He made his choice. He lunged, not at Izuku, but at a control panel on the wall. "If I cannot perfect you, I will erase you!" he shrieked, slamming a large red button. The containment cells holding the victims began to glow, and a high-pitched whining sound filled the room. A self-destruct. Silas used the moment of distraction to turn on Izuku, his phased scalpel hands slashing for the boy's throat. But Izuku was faster. He used FA gene, releasing the stored kinetic energy in a short, explosive burst of speed that made him seem to teleport. He wasn't where Silas had aimed. He was behind him. He didn't use a 100% smash. He didn't need to. He used a precise, controlled 8% kick to the back of Silas's knee, buckling his leg, and followed it with a sharp chop to the neck. The villain collapsed in a heap, unconscious. The whining from the control panel was getting louder. "The cells! I can't shut it down!" Yagi yelled, fumbling with the alien controls. "Then I'll just have to break them out!" Izuku yelled back. He moved like a green blur, a dance of controlled destruction. A 5% Detroit smash shattered the first cell's transparent door without harming the woman inside. Black whip tendrils wrapped around the others, pulling the doors off their hinges with controlled force. He moved from cell to cell, freeing the terrified civilians, shielding them with his own body from the flying debris. In less than 10 seconds, all 7 victims were free, huddling behind him as the empty cells overloaded and exploded in a shower of sparks and shrapnel. Silence descended, broken only by the ragged breathing of the rescued and the soft patter of rain from the broken window. The aftermath was a blur of flashing blue and red lights. The local police, slow to arrive but eager to take control, swarmed the scene. Paramedics tended to the victims, wrapping them in shock blankets. The media, drawn by the police scanners like moths to a flame, were already setting up their cameras. Izuku stood to the side, his work done. He watched as the victims, one by one, went to Detective Yagi. They didn't thank the flashy hero in the green costume. They thanked the tired man in the rumpled trench coat who had knelt down and spoken to them, who had taken their statements with a gentle, reassuring voice, and who had looked them in the eye and promised them they were safe. A smarmy-looking hero, the same crusher head from earlier, pushed through the crowd and tried to sling an arm around Izuku for the cameras. "Another job well done by the Heroes United," he boomed for the reporters. Before Izuku could react, Yagi stepped between them. "He's with me," the detective said, his voice quiet but carrying an authority that made the corporate hero freeze. "This scene was secured by the Muzudafa PD. Any questions can be directed to our public affairs office." He glared at Crusherhead. "Now get out of my crime scene," the hero stammered, then scurried away, his brand protection momentarily forgotten. Yagi led Izuku away from the lights, back toward the shadows where they'd begun. The rain had softened to a drizzle. "You did good, kid," Yagi said, the highest form of praise Izuku could imagine from this man. "You used your head as much as your fists. More, even. The praise belongs to you, detective," Izuku said, and he meant it. I had the tools, but you solved the case. You saw the real clues. I just helped you open the door. He looked over at the crowd, where a young girl was hugging Yagi's leg. They know who the real hero is tonight. Yagi followed his gaze. He watched the people he had sworn to protect, people he had thought he was failing. And for the first time, he saw not their fear, but their gratitude. A complex, heavy emotion settled in his chest. He turned back to Izuku, a profound understanding dawning in his exhausted eyes. He saw the kid, not as a cape, not as a weapon, but as a catalyst. A reminder of an idealism he thought had died in him decades ago. You know, Yagi began, a strange, rough sound in his throat that might have been the start of a laugh. All my life, I've seen what power does to people. Corrupts them. Makes them lazy. I figured having a quirk was the problem. He looked from his own empty hands to Izuku's scarred ones, which were glowing faintly with a soft green light. But watching you, you use your power to find a clue. To save one person from a fall. To make sure the credit goes where it's due. He shook his head, a small, sad, but genuine smile finally breaking through the cynical mask. Maybe it's not the quirk that matters after all. As the words hung in the damp air, the world around Izuku began to shimmer. The scent of rain and asphalt was fading, replaced by the celestial hum of the Nexus. Yagi didn't seem surprised, just accepting. He gave Izuku a final, sharp nod of respect. A gesture between colleagues. The last thing Izuku saw before the world dissolved back into gold was Detective Tashinori Yagi, standing alone in the rain, a flicker of his own lost, heroic light finally, stubbornly, reignited in his eyes. The return to the Nexus was like surfacing from a deep, cold sea into warm, sunlit air. The gritty despair of the noir world dissolved, replaced by the gentle, choral hum of infinite possibilities. The damp chill seeped from his bones, the phantom scent of wet asphalt and burnt coffee replaced by the clean, energizing aroma of starlight. Izuku stood in the center of the golden expanse, his hero costume looking a little less garish now, a little more earned. A deep, quiet sense of accomplishment settled in his chest. He hadn't leveled a city block or defeated a monstrous Nomu, but he had helped. He had seen a flicker of hope return to a man who had forgotten its warmth. It was a different kind of victory, a strategic and emotional one, and it felt profoundly meaningful. Prime Might stood before him, his expression one of warm approval. Well done, Ninth. You navigated a world without landmarks and reminded a lost man of his own heroic heart. You have exceeded our expectations. From the periphery, Detective Yagi gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. His gaze was still sharp, but the hard, cynical edge had been sanded down slightly. He looked at Izuku not as a piece on a board, but as a colleague. It was a silent, potent acknowledgement that meant more to Izuku than any grand praise. He succeeded. A digitized voice stated, cutting through the warm atmosphere like a shard of ice. The mission parameters were met. Probability of societal recovery in timeline designation 734 gamma has increased by 12.4%. A satisfactory outcome. The sentinel stepped forward. His every movement was accompanied by the soft hiss of pneumatics and the low thrum of the power pack on his back. Even in the all-encompassing light of the Nexus, he seemed to cast a shadow. The blue, T-shaped visor of his helmet fixed on Izuku, and the boy felt as if he were being scanned and analyzed by a supercomputer. Your weariness from the previous mission has been noted. The sentinel continued, his tone utterly devoid of sympathy. It was a simple statement of fact. Recovery protocols of the Nexus have restored your physical stamina to 100%. You are prepared for the next deployment. Your world, Izuku said, straightening his back, the quiet satisfaction of his last mission giving way to a new, uncertain tension. Correct. The sentinel confirmed. My world is designated 214 Alpha. By every quantifiable metric, it is a paradise. Crime, poverty, war, and disease have been eradicated. I defeated all for one, but the conflict cost my world everything. Cities were reduced to radioactive craters. Billions perished. From those ashes, I built a utopia. A world where no one would ever have to suffer as my generation did. The description sounded perfect, a hero's ultimate dream fulfilled. Yet, there was no pride in the sentinel's voice, no joy. Only the grim finality of a balance sheet. Prime Might's expression was somber. The sentinel's victory was absolute, but it left him as the sole authority, the only pillar left standing in a world of dust. He created a system to ensure peace, a system called harmony. The sentinel elaborated, his visor displaying a faint, holographic schematic of a sprawling, beautiful city. It is a city-wide, self-governing artificial intelligence. My consciousness is integrated with it. Harmony monitors the biometrics, brainwave patterns, and environmental data of every citizen. It predicts and neutralizes potential conflict before it can manifest. It allocates resources with perfect efficiency. It maintains absolute order. Izuku's brow furrowed. It predicts crime? Like Sir Nitai's foresight? Foresight saw one potential future. Harmony analyzes trillions of data points per second to calculate and avert all undesirable futures. The Sentinel corrected. It is a more comprehensive solution. Then, what's the problem? Izuku asked, confused. If everyone is safe and happy, what needs fixing? The Sentinel's cybernetic hand clenched into a fist, the sound of grinding servos a low growl. For the first time, a fissure of emotion cracked his monotone delivery. It is a piece born of absolute control, and it is breaking. Productivity is declining. Birth rates are stagnant. And there are anomalies. Pockets of illogical, counterproductive behavior. My system is perfect, but the human element within it is proving to be flawed. My world needs a recalibration. It needs a reminder of why this piece is necessary. You will be that reminder. The word, recalibration, sent a chill down Izuku's spine. It sounded less like inspiration and more like a threat. Go, young Midoriya! Prime Might urged, his voice heavy with unspoken concerns. See this perfect world for yourself. And remember, a cage, no matter how gilded, is still a cage. The Sentinel raised his cybernetic hand, and the world dissolved. The warm gold was consumed by a light so brilliant, so pure and white, it was utterly blinding. Izuku blinked, his eyes stinging. The transition was seamless, without the jarring sensory shift of his arrival in Yagi's world. He was standing on a sky bridge connecting two impossibly tall, graceful towers that spiraled toward the heavens like porcelain drills. The air was clean, crisp, and carried the faint scent of ozone and blooming flora. The sun, or what passed for it, was a diffuse, gentle orb of light that provided perfect illumination without a single harsh shadow. He was in a city that looked like it had been dreamed up by a visionary architect with an unlimited budget. The buildings were crafted from a luminous, self-repairing white material, accented with flowing lines of gold and chrome. Lush vertical gardens cascaded down their sides, bursting with vibrant, perfectly arranged flowers. Below, silent, teardrop-shaped maglev pods glided along invisible pathways, weaving through the city without a sound. Small, elegant drones, shaped like metallic hummingbirds with glowing blue optics, flitted through the air, occasionally tending to a drooping plant or polishing a smudge on a nearby window. It was breathtaking. It was Solara, the city born from ash. He looked down at his own costume, the dark green fabric and scuffed iron saws seeming brutish and ugly in this pristine environment. A few of the citizens gliding past on moving walkways turned to look at him. Their faces were serene, their expressions placid and mildly curious. They were all healthy, well-dressed in simple, elegant white tunics, and moved with an unhurried grace. But there was something unnervingly uniform about them. Their smiles were faint, their curiosity muted. There was no passion in their eyes, no fire. Izuku's danger sense was silent. Not just quiet, but utterly, unnervingly silent. It was a sensory deprivation that felt more wrong than the constant static of his own world or the residual dread of the last. In a city of millions, there wasn't a single flicker of malicious intent, no simmering anger, no predatory greed. There was nothing for his quirk to detect. It was a perfect, flat, sterile piece. A soft, melodic chime echoed through the air. A feminine, synthesized voice spoke from an unseen source, its tone gentle but firm. Citizen, your attire deviates from aesthetic guidelines. Your elevated heart rate suggests a state of agitation. Please remain calm. A keeper will be with you shortly to assist. Before Izuku could react, one of the hummingbird-like drones zipped down and hovered in front of his face. Its blue optic glowed as it scanned him. Unregistered individual detected. Costume classification, vigilante adjacent, pre-harmony era. Threat level, negligible. Welcome to Solara, visitor. The Lord Protector is aware of your arrival. Enjoy your state of mandatory tranquility. The drone chirped and flew away. Izuku watched it go, a deep unease settling in his stomach. Mandatory tranquility. The phrase echoed in his mind, feeling more like a prison sentence than a greeting. He spent the next few hours exploring the city, and his initial awe quickly curdled into a growing horror. He saw a child drop her ice cream cone. She didn't cry. Her face showed a flicker of mild disappointment before smoothing back into placidity. A keeper drone instantly appeared, vaporized the mess, and produced a new, identical ice cream cone for her. The child accepted it with a soft, polite, "Thank you, Harmony," and went on her way. He saw a young couple sitting on a park bench, holding hands. They looked at each other with calm affection, but there was no spark, no teasing banter, no stolen, passionate kisses. Their love seemed as regulated and efficient as the city's traffic. He found himself in a place designated as the Museum of Endeavor. Inside, holographic displays showed images of pre-harmony life. There were depictions of art, music, and sport, but they were presented like anthropological studies of a primitive, chaotic species. One display showed a soccer match. The synthesized narrator explained, "Tribal competitions such as this often resulted in expressions of extreme emotional fervor, leading to property damage and interpersonal conflict. Harmony has optimized recreation to provide gentle stimulation without the risk of passionate outbursts." The next display showed a painting, a messy, vibrant, abstract canvas of clashing colors. Pre-harmony art was an unregulated expression of internal turmoil. Today, Harmony's aesthetic algorithms generate public art scientifically proven to promote serenity and contentment. This was the Sentinel's utopia. It wasn't a world without sadness. It was a world without feeling. The system didn't just prevent crime, it optimized human emotion, dampening any feeling that was too strong, too messy, too unpredictable. Joy, grief, ambition, passion, love, they were all treated as dangerous variables to be controlled and suppressed. He was standing on a plaza, watching a group of citizens perform a synchronized, slow-motion form of Tai Chi, when he saw it. On the pristine white wall of a nearby building, for a fraction of a second, a splash of vibrant, defiant red graffiti appeared. It was the shape of a bird taking flight. Before his mind could even process the image, a swarm of nanites flowed across the wall, and the graffiti was gone. The wall returned to its perfect, sterile white. But Izuku had seen it. And he had seen who made it. A young man, standing a few yards away, had flicked his wrist, and for a moment, his hand had glowed with a faint, paint-like energy. The man saw Izuku looking, his eyes wide with a flash of genuine, unregulated panic. A nearby keeper drone turned its blue optic toward him. The young man shoved his hands in his pockets and bolted, disappearing into a service access tunnel Izuku hadn't even noticed. Without a second thought, Izuku followed. The tunnel was a stark contrast to the city above. It was dark, functional, and filled with thick bundles of fiber-optic cables and humming conduits. It was the city's circulatory system, hidden beneath the perfect skin. He followed the sound of hurried footsteps, his own soft-soled boots making no noise on the metal grating. He rounded a corner and stopped. The young man was there, his back against the wall, breathing heavily. He was with a small group of others, about a dozen people, all dressed in modified white tunics stained with grease and bright splotches of color. They were gathered in a small, forgotten maintenance junction, and the space was an explosion of everything the city above lacked. The walls were covered in chaotic, vibrant graffiti. Strange, asymmetrical sculptures made from discarded machine parts sat in the corners. A dissonant, passionate melody was being strummed on a stringed instrument made from a discarded conduit pipe. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a sanctuary of beautiful, messy, human imperfection. "Who are you?" a young woman demanded, stepping forward. Her hair was a wild, untamed mess, and she had a pair of ridiculously oversized goggles pushed up on her forehead. She looked at his costume, her eyes wide with a manic, inventive curiosity that reminded him so much of May Hatsum. That support gear is ancient. Pre-harmony. The compression molding is so beautifully inefficient. Can I take it apart? Back off, Zomi, said another figure, stepping out of the shadows. He was tall, with blonde hair that stuck up in a defiant cowlick, and his face was dominated by a huge, beaming smile that was so full of life and energy it felt like a physical force in the drab tunnel. It was a smile Izuku knew instantly. It was the smile of Mirio Togata. He wasn't as muscular as the Mirio Izuku knew, but the radiant, sun-like charisma was identical. He looked at Izuku, his smile faltering slightly into a more cautious, curious expression. You're not from Harmony, the Mirio variant said. It wasn't a question. I've never seen eyes like yours. They've got a fire in them, everyone up there. He gestured to the ceiling. Their lights are all on low power mode. My name is Deku, Izuku said, relaxing his stance. I'm a visitor who followed a tagger into the guts of the city. The Mirio variant chuckled. You're either a keeper in a very clever disguise, or you're looking for something. I'm looking for the truth, Izuku replied earnestly. The young man's smile returned, wider this time. Well, you found it. Welcome to the glitch. I'm Lumine. Like light, Izuku thought. It fits him. Over the next hour, surrounded by the outcasts and dreamers, Izuku learned the reality of the Gilded Cage. Lumine, the group's charismatic leader, explained it all. The Lord Protector, the Sentinel, as you might know him, he's not a tyrant in the classic sense. Lumine began, his voice dropping, filled with a strange mix of resentment and pity. He's a jailer who thinks he's a savior. After the Great War, he built Solara and the Harmony AI to protect us. To keep us safe. And it worked. But he didn't just take away our pain, he took away our ability to feel. Zomi, the engineer, chimed in, tinkering with a device that sparked erratically. Harmony is a network of biodampeners. It monitors our neurochemistry. If your serotonin levels spike too high from joy, it releases an inhibitor to bring you back to baseline. If your cortisol spikes from fear or stress, it soothes you with a synthetic endorphin. It keeps us all in a state of placid, manageable contentment. We are never sad. But we are never truly happy either. He stole the peaks and the valleys, Lumine said, his expression turning somber. He left us with a flat, endless plain. We have safety, but we have no meaning. There's no struggle, so there's no triumph. There's no risk of failure, so there's no thrill of success. We want the right to fall down and get back up again. We want the right to get our hearts broken. We want the right to create ugly, pointless art just because it feels good. His words resonated deep within Izuku's soul. His entire life had been a struggle. The pain of being quirkless, the agony of shattering his bones, the terror of facing villains who could kill him with a thought. Those were the moments that had defined him. Overcoming them was what had given his life meaning. To live without that struggle, it was unimaginable. Why are you here? Lumine asked, his gaze direct and piercing. That costume, that fire in your eyes. You're a hero, aren't you? The kind we only read about in the museum. I am, Izuku said. The Lord Protector, he brought me here. He thinks his world is breaking. He wants me to help him recalibrate it. A cold silence fell over the small group. The idea of a hero like Izuku, a being of immense power, siding with the Sentinel was a terrifying prospect. You can't, a young artist whispered. He'll use you to stamp us out for good. He'll call us a disease and you'll be the cure. Izuku looked at their faces, hopeful, scared, defiant, and so beautifully, messily alive. He saw the passion Zomi had for her inventions, the desperate need for expression in the tagger's eyes, the unshakable belief in freedom that radiated from Lumine. These weren't flaws in the system, they were the last sparks of humanity trying not to be extinguished. I won't, Izuku promised, his voice filled with a conviction that left no room for doubt. I'm here to help. But not him. You. A collective sigh of relief went through the group. Lumine's smile was so bright it seemed to light up the whole tunnel. Then the glitch just found its guardian angel. Before they could plan further, a series of sharp, melodic chimes echoed through the tunnel. Red lights began to flash along the conduits. Zomi swore, dropping her device. He found us. Harmonies tracked the unregistered biosignature, anomaly detected in Sector 7G. The calm, feminine voice of Harmony announced from hidden speakers. Counterproductive gathering located. Deploying pacification units. We have to go! Lumine shouted, already herding his people toward a deeper tunnel. This way! Izuku turned to face the direction of the approaching threat. Get them to safety. I'll buy you time. You can't fight them! Zomi cried. They'll just sedate you, let them try. Izuku said, a grim smile on his face as green lightning began to crackle around him. For the first time in this world, he let one for all flare to life, a vibrant, chaotic storm of energy in the sterile heart of the machine. The confrontation wasn't in a dark alley or a ruined building. It took place at the very apex of Solara, in the Lord Protector's private observation deck. After disabling the pacification drones with a non-lethal combination of Black Whip and precise 5% kicks, Izuku had made his way here. He knew a physical fight with drones was pointless. The only way to win was to confront the god in the machine. The room was a perfect circle with a 360-degree view of the city below. In the center, the sentinel stood, his back to Izuku, his cybernetic form silhouetted against the panorama of his creation. Holographic displays floated in the air around him, showing streams of data, biometric readouts, and live feeds from every corner of the city. Your interference was inefficient, the sentinel said without turning around, his digitized voice calm. You disabled 12 Keeper drones and 6 pacification units. You allowed 17 unregistered, non-compliant citizens to evade recalibration. Your actions have introduced a significant element of chaos into a stable system. It's not chaos, Izuku said, walking forward until he stood just a few feet behind the silent giant. It's life. Your city is beautiful, but it's a tomb. You've built a gilded cage and convinced everyone inside that it's a paradise. The sentinel finally turned, his blue visor fixing on Izuku. I have eliminated suffering. I have eliminated fear. I have given them eternal peace. A small price to pay for that is the moderation of excessive, destructive emotions. You call ambition and joy destructive emotions? Izuku challenged, his voice rising. You call the desire to create, to strive, to feel, a flaw to be corrected? I met your anomalies. They're not a glitch in the system. They're the last part of it that's still human. Humanity is flawed, the sentinel stated, a cold, unshakable dogma. I have seen where its flaws lead. A massive holographic screen flared to life between them. The image it showed was of a world on fire. It was the sentinel's past, a devastating war against his worlds all for one. Izuku saw cities turn to glass, armies of nomad tearing through heroes, and a younger, unarmored All Might, his body broken and bleeding, screaming in rage and grief as he stood over the body of his world's Sir Night Eye. I held his hand as he died. The sentinel's voice was a low, painful rasp, the vocoder unable to completely mask the agony in the memory. He looked at me, and he begged me to build a future where no one would ever have to feel that kind of pain again. I paid the price for their safety. I gave up my body. I gave up my name. I merged with this machine to become their eternal guardian. I will not let them squander that sacrifice on foolish risks like passion and ambition. Izuku looked at the towering, cybernetic figure, and for the first time, he saw the broken man inside. He saw Tashinori Yagi, grieving and alone, making a terrible bargain to save the world. His anger softened into a profound, aching pity. She wouldn't have wanted this, Izuku said softly. The sentinel's head snapped up. She, Nana Shimura, Izuku said, his voice ringing with the conviction of the legacy they both shared. Our master. She didn't sacrifice herself for a world without pain. She died for a world where people could smile. Genuinely smile. With their whole hearts. She gave you her power so you could protect people's right to choose, not so you could take that choice away from them. He took a step closer, his own power a gentle, green aura around him. True peace, the kind that lasts, doesn't come from being forced into contentment. It comes from people choosing to be good, choosing to be kind, choosing to love, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. You haven't saved them. You've just put them to sleep. For a long, tense moment, The sentinel was silent. The only sound was the hum of the city, and the faint crackle of Izuku's power. The holographic screen showing the war flickered and died. When the sentinel spoke again, the pained memory in his voice was gone, replaced by something colder. More resolute. Your perspective is noted, he said, the clinical tone returning with chilling finality. It is classified as a sentimental, pre-harmony ideology. A contagion of chaos. The anomalies you call human are a systemic infection. Your presence has agitated this infection. He raised his cybernetic hand, and the entire room glowed with a faint blue light. The data streams around him intensified. My analysis was incomplete, the sentinel declared. This world does not require a reminder. It requires a purge. The resistance will be surgically removed, and you, ninth user, you are the primary vector of the disease. You will be the first to be corrected. The air crackled with power, but it wasn't Izuku's. It was the immense, controlled, and utterly merciless power of the Lord Protector, finally turning his full attention from watching his city to eliminating the one who dared to wake it up. The shift in the sentinel's posture was subtle, but the change in the atmosphere was seismic. The air in the observation deck grew heavy, charged with a cold, predatory energy. The ambient hum of the city below seemed to focus into a single, piercing tone, a drawn blade aimed directly at Izuku. The blue of the sentinel's visor intensified, no longer a passive scanner but the targeting lens of a weapon. Your ideology is a threat to the stability of harmony, the sentinel's digitized voice declared, each word a perfectly enunciated sentence of doom. A threat must be neutralized. Izuku's danger sense, silent for so long in this placid world, erupted. It wasn't the familiar prickle of a fist or a knife. It was a blaring, all-encompassing klaxon, screaming that the entire room, the entire tower, had just become hostile territory. You're wrong, Izuku said, his voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in his skull. He dropped into a low, ready stance, green lightning flaring around him like a verdant storm. You're not protecting them. You're suffocating them. I won't let you correct them for wanting to be free. Your resistance is illogical, the sentinel stated. He didn't move. He didn't need to. He was the tower. He was the city. With a flick of the sentinel's cybernetic wrist, the battle began. The pristine white floor beneath Izuku's feet suddenly retracted, revealing a deep chasm. Izuku reacted instantly, activating float just as the floor disappeared from under him. He hovered in the air as wall panels slid open, revealing not guns or cannons, but arrays of sonic emitters that blasted him with a disorienting, high-frequency wave. The sound was a physical blow, rattling his teeth and making his vision swim. It was designed to overload the senses, to incapacitate without messy violence. But Izuku's mind, honed by the chaos of war and the frantic muttering of his own analysis, fought back. He focused, gritting his teeth against the assault. Analyze. Adapt. Overcome. He activated Black Whip. Dark, crackling tendrils lashed out, not at the sentinel, but at the emitters. They wrapped around the delicate sonic arrays and, with a series of sharp, controlled tugs, crushed them into silence. The disorienting wave cut off as abruptly as it began. Primitive yet effective, the sentinel noted, his voice betraying no surprise. He was merely observing and updating his tactics. Switching to physical pacification, from unseen hatches in the ceiling, a dozen new drones descended. These were not the hummingbird-like keepers. They were larger, sleeker, shaped like chrome manta rays with glowing blue lines tracing their forms. They were pacification units, the ones Zomi had warned him about. They moved with silent, fluid grace, surrounding him in a deadly ballet. They didn't fire lasers or bullets. They fired shimmering fields of blue energy that expanded into nets. Izuku dodged the first one with a burst from float, the net passing harmlessly beneath him. But they were learning, adapting. The next two were fired to intercept his trajectory, forcing him to use a quick burst of FAGing to change direction in midair with impossible speed. He was a whirlwind of green energy in the sterile white room. He couldn't afford to smash them. He didn't know if their destruction would trigger some catastrophic feedback in the tower. This wasn't a fight of annihilation. It was one of disablement. Black Whip! He yelled, sending tendrils in all directions. They wrapped around the drone's articulated wings and propulsion units. He spun, using his own body as the anchor, and slammed the drones into each other with a series of dull, metallic clangs. Sparks flew as their systems shorted out. He was holding his own, but he knew it was a losing battle. He was fighting a fortress. For every drone he disabled, 2 more could take its place. He needed to get out. He needed to get back to the glitch. Smoke screen! He expelled a massive cloud of thick, gray smoke, plunging the observation deck into impenetrable gloom. It was a stark, ugly, chaotic element in this world of perfect lines and clean light. Under the cover of his own manufactured chaos, he shot toward the panoramic window. Attempting to breach the perimeter is statistically futile. The sentinel's voice echoed from all around him. The exterior armor glass is rated to withstand a tactical missile strike. Izuku knew he couldn't smash it. Not without bringing the whole tower down. He needed an exit. He cast out a tendril of black whip, probing the structure of the room, feeling for a weak point, a service hatch, anything. He found it, a ventilation shaft, hidden behind a decorative panel. He wrapped a tendril around the panel and ripped it from the wall. Before he could dive in, a cybernetic hand, moving with impossible speed, shot out of the smoke and clamped around his throat. The sentinel was suddenly there, his immense form emerging from the smog like a phantom. The grip was like iron. Izuku felt his airway constrict, his vision starting to speckle with black dots. The sheer physical power of this all-might, augmented by cybernetics and unhindered by injury, was terrifying. Your quirks are novel. The sentinel's visor was inches from his face, a cold, unfeeling blue eye. But they are merely tools. I am the system. And the system always wins. Izuku clawed at the hand, his lungs burning. Panic began to set in. But then, through the haze of oxygen deprivation, he felt the thrum of the vestiges. He felt Nana Shimura's gentle strength, Daigoro Banjo's boisterous defiance, and the quiet, stubborn will of Yoichi. They weren't giving up. He couldn't either. He stopped struggling. He relaxed his body for a split second, then channeled everything he had into a single, focused point. Not a smash. Not a kick. He activated gearshift. He targeted his own body, overclocking his cellular acceleration for a microsecond. The effect was instantaneous. From the sentinel's perspective, Izuku simply ceased to exist in his grasp. Izuku moved so fast that he phased through the cybernetic fingers, leaving the sentinel holding nothing but air. He appeared a few feet away, gasping for breath, clutching his bruised throat. The sentinel stood frozen for a full second, his internal processors clearly struggling to analyze what had just happened. A quirk that could manipulate velocity on a quantum level? It was a variable his perfect system hadn't accounted for. That 1 second of hesitation was all Izuku needed. He dove headfirst into the ventilation shaft, pulling the bent panel back over the opening as he went. He tumbled through the darkness, the sound of alarms now blaring behind him, a chaotic, angry sound that told him he had, for the first time, truly broken the city's harmony. He emerged from the ventilation system in the bowels of the city, crashing into the maintenance tunnels near the glitch's hideout. He landed hard but rolled with the impact, coming up on his feet. The resistance fighters were there, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. Lamine Zomi, and the others stared at him, at his torn costume and the red mark on his neck. You fought him. Lamine breathed, his usual bright smile gone, replaced by disbelief. You fought the Lord Protector, and you came back. He knows where you are. Izuku gasped, his voice raspy. The whole system is on high alert. He called you an infection. He's planning a purge. Panic rippled through the small group. They had lived their lives as ghosts, as minor annoyances. Now they were being targeted for extermination. Where do we go? The young artist cried, his voice trembling. He's everywhere. The walls have eyes, the air has ears, then we have to blind him. Zomi declared, her manic energy now focused into a sharp, determined point. She pointed at a massive conduit pipe running along the ceiling of the tunnel. That's the primary data conduit for this sector. It routes all the sensory information from the keepers and the environmental sensors back to the central harmony core. If we can sever it, you'll blind him, but only for a moment. Izuku finished, his mind racing. He'll have redundant systems. But it could buy us time. Time to move. To evacuate. Lumine's eyes lit up with a defiant fire. No. Not just evacuate. This is our chance. He's been a ghost, a god in the machine for a generation. You just made him bleed. You showed everyone that he can be fought. People are scared, but they're also curious. For the first time, something new is happening. He was right. Izuku could feel it. The oppressive, placid calm of the city had been shattered. Now, there was a new emotion rippling through the collective consciousness. Fear. But fear was an emotion, a powerful one. And where there was fear, there could also be hope. Okay, Izuku said, taking charge. Here's the plan. Zomi, you're the expert. How do we cut that conduit, and how much time will it buy us? Zomi's eyes gleamed behind her goggles. It's a shielded optic bundle. Physical force will just trigger a system shutdown and reroute. We need to overload it with a massive energy pulse. I can rig a bypass from the main power line, but it'll cause a cascade failure. The lights will go out, the maglevs will stop, this whole sector will go dark. We might get 5 minutes, maybe 10, before his secondary systems kick in. 10 minutes? Izuku muttered. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Lumine, while it's dark, I need you and your people to do what you do best. Spread the word. Be a symbol. Not of me. Of freedom. Lumine grinned, a true, brilliant Mirio Togata grin. You want us to make some noise? Oh, we can make some noise. I'll handle the conduit, Izuku said. And I'll handle the sentinel when he comes for us. He looked at the faces of the small, terrified, hopeful rebellion. He was no longer just a visitor, he was their champion. His vibrant, chaotic energy was the perfect antidote to the city's sterile order. He wasn't just fighting for them, he was a living symbol of everything they were trying to reclaim. Zomi worked with a feverish, inspired genius, her hands a blur as she stripped cables and rerouted power junctions, her muttering a constant stream of technical jargon that Izuku could barely follow. He stood guard, his danger sense a wide net, feeling for the approach of Harmony's enforcers. He could feel them massing, pacification units sweeping the tunnel system grid by grid. They were getting closer. It's ready! Zomi shouted, backing away from a jury-rigged console now wired directly into the main power and the data conduit. Once you hit this, the whole sector goes dark. You'll need to hit the conduit itself with a massive kinetic force at the exact same time to shatter the optic fibers before the safeguards kick in. I can do that, Izuku said, flexing his hands. This is it, Lumine said, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. His expression was serious, the weight of the moment clear in his eyes. For the first time in my life, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's terrifying. And it's the most wonderful feeling in the world. Thank you, Deku. Izuku gave him a determined nod. Go. Be the spark. As the glitch members scattered into the darkness, ready to spread their message, Izuku turned to the console. He took a deep breath, focusing one for all. One shot. I only get one shot. He slammed his hand down on Zomi's console. The lights in the tunnel flickered, then died, plunging him into absolute blackness. At the exact same instant, he unleashed a 45% Detroit smash directly into the conduit above. He didn't aim to obliterate it. He aimed to shatter it. The force, perfectly timed with the power surge, sent a shockwave through the armored pipe. He heard a sound like a million pieces of glass breaking at once as the fiber optic core disintegrated. For a moment, there was absolute silence and darkness. He had done it. He had cut the eye out of the beast. Then, his danger sense screamed. It was a single, piercing point of attack. From the end of the dark tunnel, a blue light ignited. It was the Sentinel's visor. He was here. And he was walking, not floating. He was coming in person. You have broken my city. The Sentinel's voice was different now. The clinical detachment was gone, replaced by a cold, controlled fury. The vocoder crackled with it. You have introduced pain and fear to a world that bled to save from those very things. This ends now. He began to walk toward Izuku, his heavy footfalls echoing in the silent tunnel. This wasn't a remote attack by a city-wide AI. This was personal. This was the raw, physical power of a prime all-might in a cybernetically enhanced body, fueled by a righteous, grief-stricken rage. "I'm not trying to break your city," Izuku said, his own power rising to meet the challenge. Green and blue light warred in the darkness of the tunnel. "I'm trying to set it free," he charged. The sentinel charged. They met in the middle of the tunnel with a cataclysmic impact that shook the very foundations of the city. The force of their collision sent a visible shockwave blasting down the corridor, bending metal and shattering the few remaining light fixtures. The fight was nothing like the one in the observation deck. This was a brawl. It was brute force against agile precision. The sentinel was a juggernaut, each punch carrying the force of a freight train. Izuku, using a combination of float, FA gene, and gearshift, was a phantom, a blur of green lightning that was almost impossible to hit. He dodged a haymaker that shattered the concrete wall behind him, the stone turning to powder. He slid under a sweeping kick from the sentinel's cybernetic leg that left a deep gouge in the metal floor. He couldn't match the sentinel's raw power head-on. He'd be pulverized. He had to be smarter. Faster. He used Black Whip to create a web, trying to entangle the sentinel's limbs, but the cybernetic arms generated a powerful energy field that disintegrated the dark tendrils on contact. "Your tricks are predictable," the sentinel growled, lunging forward and grabbing Izuku by the leg. He swung him like a club, smashing him through a series of support struts before flinging him down the tunnel. Izuku crashed to the ground, his ribs screaming in protest. He coughed, tasting blood. The sentinel's strength was overwhelming. He was losing. As he struggled to his feet, he saw it. Out of the corner of his eye, through a maintenance grate that looked up to the city above, he saw flashes of color. Red. Yellow. Blue. It was Lumine and the others. On the darkened screens of the city, which had all gone black when the power went out, they were painting. Not with light, but with real, physical paint. They were creating murals of birds, of suns, of people running and jumping and laughing. It was chaotic. It was messy. It was beautiful, and people were watching. Citizens, drawn out of their homes by the blackout, were looking up at the forbidden art, their placid faces shifting with expressions of wonder, confusion, and dawning fascination. They were seeing something new, something Harmony hadn't approved. Something real. Seeing that, a new strength flooded Izuku's weary limbs. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for their right to see that art. For their right to feel that wonder. He got to his feet, a true, unshakable smile on his face, a smile full of fire and defiance. It was a smile the sentinel hadn't seen in this world for a very, very long time. "You don't get it," Izuku said, his voice ringing with renewed power. "You think you're fighting me. But you're fighting them. You're fighting the human spirit. And that's a fight you can't win." He didn't charge this time. He stood his ground. He reached deep into One for All, not just to the power, but to the hearts within. He thought of Nana Shimura, of her sacrifice and her belief in the future. The sentinel paused, his analytical mind trying to process the sudden shift in Izuku's demeanor. This wasn't the desperate struggle of a cornered animal. This was the calm resolve of a martyr. "I don't want to defeat you," Izuku said, his voice echoing in the tunnel. "I want to reach you. The man inside that machine. The hero who grieved for his friends. The Tashinori Yagi who swore to build a better world." He pushed off, rocketing toward the sentinel, but he didn't lead with a fist. He channeled the full, unbridled emotional legacy of One for All. As he closed the distance, he wasn't just a boy in a green suit. He was a conduit for generations of hope. "Remember her!" he roared, his voice amplified by the power of the vestiges. "Remember why she chose you. Not to control them, but to let them smile freely." His fist, glowing with the fiery light of a 100% smash, connected with the sentinel's chest plate. But the impact wasn't just physical. As his fist struck home, a psychic shockwave, a torrent of memory and emotion from the vestiges, poured into the sentinel's consciousness. The sentinel was blasted back. But it wasn't the force of the blow that staggered him. It was the vision that exploded in his mind. He saw Nana Shimura, not dying, but smiling as she trained a young, scrawny Tashinori. He saw her pride. He saw her belief in a future where people were free to make their own choices, to find their own joy, even if it meant feeling pain. He saw the faces of the citizens above, their eyes wide with a feeling he had long since forbidden, awe. He crashed against the far wall of the tunnel, his system screaming with warnings. But the man inside the machine wasn't listening. He looked at his own cybernetic hands, then at Izuku, who stood panting, his arm broken and useless from the force of the blow, but his eyes blazing with an indomitable light. The sentinel slowly, shakily, got to his feet. He looked at Izuku, and for the first time, his head tilted in a gesture that was not analytical, but questioning. The cold, furious blue of his visor flickered, softened, and then, for a single, stunning moment, it shut off. In the darkness of the tunnel, the Lord Protector was gone. And Toshinori Yagi, for the first time in a generation, was looking out at the world through his own eyes. He saw the defiant boy hero. He saw the forbidden art blooming in his dark city. He saw the spark of a rebellion he had tried so hard to prevent, and realized, with dawning, earth-shattering clarity, that it was the very thing he had forgotten how to fight for. He didn't have the answer. He didn't know what came next. But as the first of his city's citizens began to tentatively add their own splash of color to a nearby wall, he knew his perfect, silent peace was over. And he knew, with a certainty that shook his soul, that this was not a defeat. It was a beginning. He raised his cybernetic hand, not as a weapon, but as a gesture of concession. You have reminded me. His voice, stripped of the vocoder's filter, was a rusty, unused thing, but it was human. You have reminded me of what I was truly fighting for. He looked at the chaos blooming in his perfect city, and a single tear traced a path down his unseen cheek. He then looked at Izuku and gave a small, sorrowful nod. Thank you?